Hello, and thank you for joining us today. The webinar is now beginning, and I would like to take care of a little housekeeping before introducing our speakers. For today's webinar, all participants will be on mute. So if you have any questions, please type it into the chat box and we will answer questions as time allows. We will then answer any additional questions after the webinar and email the questions and their answers out to all attendees. To have you test the chat function, please type where you are calling in from into the chat box now. Welcome, my name is Erica Peterson, and I will be filling in for Symia Stigler, who is the Executive Director of the Attendance Institute. I would like to introduce the speakers who will be participating in today's broadcast. Representative James White will be joining us today. Representative White is a native Texan and grew up in Houston. Elected to the House of Representatives in 2010, Representative White is the co-author of House Bill 2398 and is a passionate and effective advocate for the fundamental values of strong families, constitutional government, and economic prosperity. Representative Romero is a well-respected father and businessman and community leader who believes that success is measured not by how much you have received, but by how much you have given. We're also fortunate to have Reverend Tatum joining us today. Reverend Tatum is an ordained Baptist minister and president of the Texas Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Fort Worth, Texas. Mr. Mike Brown is the mandated cost program manager at School Innovations and Achievement. He is an expert in regulatory compliance, and Mike will be walking us through the tenets of House Bill 2398 today. Ms. Kim Brewer is the regional account manager for School Innovations and Achievement in Pearland, Texas. As a former classroom teacher, Ms. Brewer knows how challenging creating home-to-school connections can be. Ms. Brewer works now to connect districts and campuses with technology solutions that relieve routine administrative burdens and foster home-to-school communication. I would like to thank all of our participants for joining us today and to tell you briefly about the Attendance Institute and the work that we do. The Attendance Institute is a nonprofit organization whose mission is simple: to improve attendance and educational outcomes for all students. Our objective is to substantively improve student attendance and ultimately student achievement. We accomplish our mission by partnering with schools and their surrounding communities to inventory and assess attendance and absenteeism data. In place of the attendance bookends perfect and chronic, we analyze all levels of absenteeism and work with an entire community to identify attendance barriers and deploy targeted and broad stroke solutions that will improve attendance rates, increase family engagement, and create cultures of high expectations in educational success. It is our pleasure to bring this webinar to you today and invite you to join us in cultivating student success. Now I'd like to give you a little bit of history about House Bill 2398. HB 2398 was co-authored by Representative White and replaces existing criminal prosecution with civil activities. This bill marks a significant shift from a focus on penalties to focusing on the causes of non-attendance. Prior to HB 2398, Texas was one of only 2 states that still prosecuted minors for truancy. In practice, the bill changes how districts and courts deal with truant students. The bill has won widespread support from the Texas Association of School Boards, TASB, the Texas Association of School Business Officials, TASBO, the Juvenile Justice Association of Texas, Texas Justices of the Peace and Constables Association, and the Texas PTA. House Bill 2398, effective date for implementation was September 1st, 2015. With that as a primer, I'd like to turn this over to Representative White. Representative White, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning. Merry Christmas.
Good morning.
Hello?
Thank you. We are here.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Well, thank you for having me on this morning. I just want to just say how incredible it is. We have so many people around the state, and I don't know if my colleague has come on the webinar yet.
I'm on board.
Hey, how's it going, Reverend? Yes, I enjoyed working with Yes, I enjoyed working with Representative Romero last session, which I believe was his first session. And I say I believe it was his first session because as all freshmen, you have to come in at such a steep learning curve. But Representative Romero, by being a small businessman as well, came into the legislature with a wealth of practical experience and really tackled a lot of great issues that would help all of Texas, and I'm proud to serve with them. Also, Representative Tatum, I've known him for some time. He's just a passionate advocate for fairness and opportunity for all, and I think I've had an opportunity to talk with at least one representative from the Attendance Institute this year, especially after the passage of, House Bill 2398, and I want to thank you for your work and just everyone. I mean, I am just overwhelmed, whether it's East Texas, West Texas, urban, rural, the people that are so concerned about this. In the state of Texas, the most significant opportunity we can give our great kids in our state is an education. We want and need our kids coming to school. We need our parents getting our young people to school. We need to dedicate more monies from appropriations for education, and we need to make sure that it is appropriated fairly and effectively. But at the same time, we have great teachers, great principals. They can work magic, but they can't work their magic if the kids are not sitting in their seat, mentally and physically prepared to engage in learning. And as a former school teacher, school attendance and teacher quality are two indispensable factors in making sure that our kids are prepared for the 21st century global high-tech economy. So with House Bill 398, let me just cover just a few points about it. Okay, House Bill 2398. Prior to HB 2398, schools were having to file these criminal complaints against parents and students after 3 absences within a 4-week period, and definitely doing it by the 10th unexcused absences. This is what was happening, and we just had a lot of disproportionality in who was being impacted. It was students of color, students of lower socioeconomic environment, and then from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, even from campus to campus within Texas, you just had this unequal application of the law. So what we did in House Bill 2398, the most significant thing is we repealed or eliminated the criminal misdemeanor sanction on the student. So it does not mean that the student, it still means the student must come to school, okay? But there's no criminal sanction there. There's no criminal record being generated. And I'll get into how we get the student to school, but I wanted to make sure that we maintain the criminal offense on the parent, though, with some conditions, and those conditions are just like in any criminal court. The school district that's bringing the charges must prove that the parent is actually the cause of the truancy. As a former school teacher, I knew of situations where parents, a single parent, a mom, having to get to work at 9 o'clock or maybe 8:30, rushes the kid to school in the car, sees them get out of the car under the awning, go into the school campus, and the kid walks straight through the school campus, walks right out the back of the campus with friends, and they go out and have a good time during off campus. And you have to ask yourself, is that really the parent's fault? Or is there some holes there where it involves school security and school supervision. We will continue to allow our JP courts, that's our Justice of the Peace courts and municipal courts, to handle most of these cases. There will, for the parent, on the first offense, if the parent is proven guilty, it's $100, and it goes up in increments of $100 up to the fifth offense. Also, the most important thing about this is that we strengthen the guidelines for campuses and school districts to implement and execute attendance intervention measures. And my friends, when I'm telling everyone, I've got my judges that are concerned about this. I've got, school personnel concerned about this. And as a former school teacher, and everybody needs to catch this, as a former school teacher, I didn't remember in my 17 years of teaching, Romero, no kid was sitting in my classroom saying, Representative White, I'm here because I don't want to get a truancy ticket. I never heard that. What I did hear, Reverend Tatum, was, I want to be a doctor. I want to be an attorney. I want to be a pastor. I want to run a small business. Or, I like playing football. I like playing basketball. But overall, I like Miss So-and-so, who's my English teacher. I like going to Mr. So-and-so's class. He's my history teacher and my coach. In many instances, especially in lower socioeconomic environments, kids are trying to get to school because in the winter, it's warm at school, probably not at home during the day and at night. They're getting at least 2 meals, breakfast and lunch. So what I'm getting at is, from a teacher's perspective, if a student is not coming to school, it's probably something dysfunctional. And it's not always they're just sitting at home playing Game Boys or skipping school, going out, doing marijuana in the park. I'm not saying that's not happening, okay? But I'm just saying if the student is not coming to school, that's a sign of some type of dysfunctionality, because in my experience, kids look forward to going to school. So we wanted to strengthen the intervention measures, the counseling, the encouragement, and if a student is impacted by a pregnancy, by being homeless, by being a foster child, we don't see why you have to take that through the criminal court system. That is a social service issue, and it needs to be dealt with within the school in partnership with social service agencies. See, what we're finding out is, and it's not saying that our judges don't care, it's not saying that our law enforcement people don't care, but going through the criminal justice system to deliver social services is inefficient and not effective.
Absolutely.
Also 2398, it requires an expunction of past truancy conviction records, and moving forward, the expunction of truancy conviction records once the issue of chronic, and that's really what we're trying to tackle here, my friends, chronic truancy. Once we've come to a solution, we want to expunge those records. In my work in criminal justice on House Corrections Committee, House Juvenile Justice Committee, I was just really surprised at how loose, how unthoughtful we are with people's records. And by being unthoughtful with these records, when these young people compete for a job, compete for a position in the U.S. military, go to Representative Romero's small business and try to get a job, and he runs their background, and these things come up that happened while they were juveniles, when we thought that the juvenile record should be a sealed situation, these are having impacts on students and young people down the road. Another innovation in this House Bill 2398 is a judicial trust fund. When I sat down and talked with local judges, they talked about how they had small business people like Representative Romero, industry in their precincts, in their town. Okay, somebody probably needs to mute there. Okay. How they had these folks in their town that understood the value of education and understood that attendance is important. And so they would have these small businessmen and industry reps that would provide clothing, all types of financial support that the judges could give to parents and students to facilitate them coming to school. Well, for all the right reasons, county attorneys reached out to these judicial officers and told them that they were violating their judicial canon by technically taking contributions while being a sitting member of the bench. So we came up with this innovation of a judicial trust fund where the county commissioner's court, working with their county auditor, their county treasurer, will establish a fund where charities and industries can donate to and come up with the procedures on disseminating these funds. So it protects the integrity of our judges and also ensures that we are, again, tackling chronic truancy first and foremost as a social service issue and not a criminal justice issue. So in wrapping this up, there is a judicial process for students that continue to skip school. So just quickly, let me just hit this. So at the 3-day unexcused mark within a 4-week period, the school must counsel the parent and the student on the potential adverse action that can happen if this truancy keeps happening. If it happens to the extent that it's 10 unexcused absences in a 6-month period, then the school district can file on the student, but that filing is done in a judicial, in a justice of the peace or municipal court, in a quasi civil juvenile proceeding. And again, it's not a Class C misdemeanor. It is a civil offense when it comes to the student that's alleged to have engaged in truant conduct.
Thank you, Representative White, and thank you for carrying forth this bill, as well as for how thoughtful you were in putting all of the tenets together in consideration. Representative Romero, do you have anything to add or any remarks you'd like to share?
Certainly. First of all, I mean, it's easy to see why someone like myself as a small business owner and someone who represents a very poor district in Fort Worth, Texas, can get behind a bill and can get behind someone like Representative White. It's very obvious that the Representative White has passion for children and passion for the future of Texas. I think that that's what we're really talking about here. When he describes me as a small business owner, we the small business owners that create economies locally, create economies here in these communities where these kids, unfortunately many of them that don't end up going to college, end up working for people like me in the construction field or the supply industry, and in most cases the service industry. Regardless of those things, we need well-educated, smart young men and women, and those things are all there. what we see is young people who sometimes don't have somebody believing in them at home in all cases. And it's this bill that allows the court in some cases. Just last night I heard a story of a young woman running for Congress in Nevada, and she told a story that when she was incarcerated, had shackles on, and at the age of 15 years, she didn't have somebody at home that believed in her, not because her single-parent father didn't love her or didn't appreciate her, but because she had 10 brothers and sisters, and dad just didn't have enough time to be at home. Yet someone in the criminal justice system believed in her and said, you know, you deserve another chance, and I don't want this on your record, and you're going to move forward. And now she's running for Congress in Nevada. Those stories exist.
Absolutely. And I think that HB 2398 really allows schools to do troubleshooting and encourages finding solutions for families and connecting them with services. Thank you so much, Representative Romero, for joining us today. Reverend Tatum, do you have anything that you would like to add as well?
Yes, first of all, I want to thank you all for hosting this incredible webinar, and I want to thank Representative White and Romero for joining us today. You know, former Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock said it's not right, and it's true. And Representative Romero and Representative White are two champions for children that I appreciate them and their willingness to put their partisanship aside and work closely and together on helping our babies get better. You know, I just recently read a report from the comptroller, and the comptroller said that she's going to have to reassess her numbers because Texas is going to be short over $2 billion. And what that means very clearly is that there's not going to be any more money to try to make the changes that we need to make in Texas. So I'm so thankful and pleased and proud that Representative White and Romero took the courageous, bold step, along with other Republicans and Democrats, to say that they support education and not incarceration for our children. And I just firmly believe Texas is at a point where we have to tap into the talent that we have and help our children get better by believing in who they are and what they can become. So we want to work closely. The Texas Attendance Project is proud to work very closely with the Attendance Institute and with student innovation and achievement and the software they bring and what others bring. Listen, we need all we can get. Time for us to put our pride aside and come together collectively as Texans, help our children get better. I believe that our best days are ahead. We have to do three things. We have to be open, we have to listen, and then we make a decision together. If we believe that Texas is the greatest state in the country, and in in this whole business of helping people get better, then now is the time to embrace what the Attendance Institute is trying to do in helping our babies get better. And so we support their effort wholeheartedly, and we encourage you to get behind the Texas Attendance Project, where we support education and not incarceration for our babies. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you,
I'm back now. I apologize. I'm sorry, I was cut off there, so I'm back.
No problem. Thank you,
Representative Romero.
Thank you for joining us, Representative Romero, Representative White, and Reverend Tatum. We appreciate all of the work that you do for our kids and your words of wisdom in joining us today. I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Mike Brown, Mandated Cost Program Manager at School Innovations and Achievement, who will be walking us through the tenets that Representative White started to outline for HB 2398.
Thank you, Erica. Good morning, everyone. I want to start off by giving you some background information on how truancy was viewed before the passage of House Bill 2398. Under the prior law, as it was mentioned earlier, truancy could basically be categorized as a criminal offense, with over 100,000 students being sent to criminal court annually. Studies have shown that many of these students were disproportionately affected minority and low-income students. With the passage of 2398, there's been a shift in how the state wants school districts to handle attendance issues. Courts should now only be used as a last resort and are no longer criminal, but are civil in nature. The legislature wants school districts to first focus on intervention and truancy prevention strategies for students exhibiting attendance issues. This includes conferencing with both the student and the parent to determine what's causing the lack of attendance and to develop solutions that will get the student back in school. Another change the law makes is that the compulsory attendance has been extended through the age of 19. It's important to point out here that students over 19 can still have their enrollment revoked if they have more than 5 unexcused absences in a semester. Also, parent education continues to be required at the beginning of the year to notify all parents in general that a student is truant. Prosecution, and the student can still be referred to truancy court. The law defines what absences are defined as excused, as you can see here on the screen, and there are these 8 specific reasons that you see here. In addition to the state-approved list of excused absences we just saw in that previous slide, the law also permits districts to have their own policy allowing excused absences for the additional reasons you see here. That includes to serve as a voting clerk, to visit a college or a university, and to sound taps at a military honors funeral. So what happens when students fail to show up to school? Well, when a student reaches their 3rd unexcused full or partial day absence within a 4-week period, school districts are now required to send notice to the parent. That notice has to inform the parent that it's their responsibility to ensure the student attends school. It has to inform the parent that truancy prevention measures will be initiated by the school, and also has to contain language requesting a parent conference to get to the bottom of the attendance issues and come up with solutions that will get the child back in the learning environment. Truancy prevention measures, let's talk about those now. Districts are now required to adopt and implement truancy prevention measures with the goal of minimizing referrals to the truancy court. These measures are required to be taken after the student has been absent from school without valid excuse on 3 or more days or parts of days within a 4-week period, but before the student reaches that truant stage. And truancy is defined as failing to attend school on 10 or more days or parts of days within a 6-month period within the same school year. Best practice here is to implement those measures as early as possible in order to quickly correct the attendance problem and minimize the number of days missed. So what are the truancy prevention measures specifically? Well, they include a behavior improvement plan, school-based community service for the student, such as a volunteer project that is designed to improve the community in some way, and they can also include referring the student for services that address the attendance problems, such as counseling, mediation, mentoring, and so forth. The law requires at least one of the measures to be taken, but you can impose as many as are needed depending on the student's situation and what you think is the best strategy to improve the attendance. For students subject to truancy prevention measures who are pregnant, in foster care, that are homeless, or they are the principal income earner of the family, it's important to point out here that you're required to offer additional counseling services to these students because of their unique problems, and also you cannot refer them to truancy court. Let's look at truancy prevention facilitators. Districts are now required to hire truancy prevention facilitators to implement the truancy prevention measures and meet annually with the court to discuss the effectiveness of these measures. Since you'll be discussing this information with the court, it's important that you're able to keep track of those measures and their success throughout the year in order to demonstrate to the court the measures you're using and what is not working. Also, it's important to point out that the law gives districts the ability to designate an existing employee as the truancy prevention facilitator instead of hiring someone from the outside. The role of attendance officers. When it comes to the role of attendance officers, the main thing to point out here is that they're no longer able to take students into custody since the law no longer views truancy as criminal in nature. All other duties of the attendance officers remain as they were before the truancy law change. On this slide here, I just want to point out that students who are not in school can still be escorted by attendance officers back to campus at the request of the parent. And if truancy prevention measures fail, let's look at what happens if truancy prevention measures fail here. If those measures fail and the student does reach the truancy stage, he or she can then be referred to truancy court. Also, districts can still file complaints to criminally prosecute parents who contributed to their child's non-attendance. Although in order to do this, the district has to show evidence of criminal negligence on the parent's part, such as not following through on a behavioral improvement contract. When referring students to truancy court, note that only students who are at least 12 years old but are younger than 19 can be referred. And when making the referral, you have to provide the court with a statement certifying that truancy prevention measures have been applied and those measures have failed, and whether the student is eligible for special education services or not. Now let's look at some of the court judgments for students referred to truancy court. Remedies here could include ordering the student to attend school without any unexcused absences, take the high school equivalency exam. The court could order the child to attend a rehab program, work on a community service project, or even receive tutoring. If students are found to be in contempt of court, the child could be required to pay a fine of up to $100, have their driver's license or permit suspended, or could even be referred to juvenile court. Dismissal of the petition, let's talk about that here in this slide. Truancy court petitions can be dismissed by the court for the reasons listed here in this slide. If a child is going to be sent to the truancy court, make sure you understand and become familiar with the reasons for dismissal to ensure you've complied with each of them. Otherwise, the petition is going to be tossed out and all of your hard work and effort will be lost. So now let's review what we just discussed and see how the new truancy law is implemented in this flowchart, which comes to us courtesy of the Texas Tribune. Basically, if a student has 3 or more absences in a 4-week period, the school has to notify the parent, request a conference, and begin truancy prevention measures. If those measures fail and the student becomes truant, the school needs to determine if the truancy is the result of a pregnancy, being homeless, if the child is in foster care, or because the student is the primary income earner for the family. If this is the case, remember that the student cannot be referred to truancy court and has to be given additional counseling services. If not, then the child can be referred to truancy court and could possibly be fined, have their driving privileges suspended, or be referred to juvenile court. In closing, before I turn it over to Kim, with the passage of House Bill 2398, there's been a shift in how attendance issues are dealt with. Truancy is no longer a criminal offense, and courts are to be used as a last resort. School districts now need to focus on collaborative intervention and prevention strategies that address attendance issues at an early stage that involve parents, students, and school staff with the goal of keeping students in class and getting students that are exhibiting attendance issues back in the learning environment. And now I'd like to turn it over to a regional area manager for Texas, Kim Brewer, who works with school districts in Texas to implement the changes brought about by House Bill 2398.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, my name is Kim Brewer, and as Mike said, I'm the Regional Account Manager for School Innovations and Achievement, and I am a native Texan, and as Erica mentioned earlier, I spent 13 years as an educator at a district in the Houston area. The work that I did there definitely helped to drive the passion for the work that I'm doing now. Currently working with several districts here in Texas to put a proactive process in place to address their attendance issues. Many districts we've worked with for several years, so they had a bit of an advantage when all these changes took place. But my real passion is to help districts alleviate some of the administrative burden that has come with some of these changes, and to help free up your staff to do what's really important here, and that's to have the time to mentor and work with students. But they can't really do that unless they have all of the accurate data that they need to make sure they're working with the right students and in the right ways. So specifically looking at this new process that we have here with the flow chart from the Tribune, attention to attendance is a solution that provides assistance with every step along the way. We track student attendances or absences based on EdCode, and our software accommodates that rolling calendar to make sure the notifications are timely and that you don't miss a filing window. We prepare and mail all attendance notifications. Attention to attendance pulls all your attendance data into one easy-to-use dashboard where your staff can easily track student attendance, schedule and document conferences, home visits, phone calls, etc., all of the documentation that you need, as well as make any notes necessary, and you can also document truancy prevention measures that are now required, as we've spoken about after that third absence in the 4th-week period. So it's really a place to document all of the things that you're doing to be able to prove what you're doing with your students. We also have a document repository where you can save notes and interventions at a campus and a district level. And then within each student, you have a detailed report that can be downloaded and or printed to show all documentations, all letters sent, and then the absence summary information if a court filing is deemed necessary. I was a teacher. I've worked in education. Some court filings are going to be necessary. We get that, and we want to help you have the information you need when that situation arises. We have been able to see some incredible results, increasing parent communication. When data is accurate, notifications go out timely, and then your staff is freed up to help communicate not only with parents but with your students, your attendance problem becomes smaller. Over 3 years, we've seen a 25% reduction in our clients' total absences. And look at this breakdown, not just with the truant kids and our chronic population, which is very important that we do help with as well, but also within students with excessive excused absence. Because when a student is absent, they're missing learning time, whether they're at the doctor or at Disney World or just skipping school. It doesn't matter. They're missing instruction. They're missing crucial building blocks that they need to be academically successful, not just this year, but in the years to come, because like I said, they're building blocks. Our vision and goal at School Innovations and Achievement very much aligns with that of House Bill 2398. We want to look at the big picture. We want to address attendance as a whole and implement a proactive approach that helps our children be successful. There is no way to decrease the achievement gap. There's no way to increase test scores or college and career readiness if your kids aren't in school. It's not going to happen. That learning time is crucial, and you can't learn if they're not there. They can't learn if they're not there. And we can't get kids in school until we free up our staff, get to the root of the problem, and figure out what's going on with each student and help get them back in school. Attention to attendance is not only a way to document what's necessary for court filing, but it's an early warning system that helps you pull in all that information so that you can catch those kids before they get to that point. A2A is not just a software, it's a process, and it's a solution. I'll be happy to share more specific information with any of you guys that are interested. My information will come up at the end of the webinar. But House Bill 2398, I'm going to leave you with this. House Bill 2398 is giving us the opportunity as educators to do what we got into education to do, and that's to help students be successful.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you so much. I'd like to move into the question and answer portion, and in the interest of time, I want to reiterate at the beginning that if you have questions, please enter them into the chat box We'll answer a few questions, but we have several, so I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them this morning. However, we will summarize and type up all the questions as well as the respective answers and send those out to all attendees of the webinar at the end. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start and read the first question that we received. So one question is, you mentioned that Texas is one of only 2 states that prosecuted students for truancy. Many of us feel that the removal of that ability essentially took the teeth out of our attendance enforcement practices. How do you respond to that belief? Mike, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Erica. That's a great question. I can absolutely understand that point of view. Unfortunately, the legacy of prosecuting students simply outweighs the benefits. A kid who has a criminal record by the time he leaves high school is a kid who's likely to have a criminal record as an adult. And 2398, it's important for you guys to know that 2398 doesn't strip you of the ability to prosecute students. Rather, it makes prosecution the last line of defense after all other resources have been exhausted. If you're looking for more information about the criminal prosecution of students, there's a website that you can go to. It's the Texas Appleseed website, and they've written extensively on the subject.
Great, thank you. Another question.
Excuse me.
Yes, please.
Excuse me. Could I add into that? Because I was instrumental in crafting this bill, and this is what I would say. This is State Representative White. You say teeth has been taken out. What teeth has been taken out? Prior to HB 2398, after 3 days, definitely at the 10 excuse day period, you could go to the criminal court and file on the student. You had the option of, taking the driver's license, having them do community service, having them do tutorials. That can still happen now. Prior to HB 2398, you could file criminally on the parent. That remains. So I would ask my friends out there that are educators, and I am an educator. I'm a former educator. We know in our classrooms that there are 2 types of kids. The ones that make you mad and the ones that make you scared. The ones that make you scared, we definitely need to get them in another setting. Okay, we know who those kids are, and it's not a whole lot of them, okay? Maybe 1 out of 1,000, okay? But a lot of our kids, the one who sits in his seat, sits down, then sit up straight in his seat, the one whose pants are a little sagging, the one who just doesn't come to school when I want them to. That is the kid that makes me upset, makes me mad. Making adults mad is not necessarily a criminal offense. So understand what our criminal justice system is for. Our criminal justice system is to protect our life and property, not retaliate against people who just do things that we don't like.
Excellent. Thank you, Representative White. I have another question from the audience. If the absences are not the result of pregnancy, homeless, foster, or wage earners, do schools still have the responsibility to file? Right?
And the answer to that is yes, if they do reach the point of being truant and those truancy prevention measures fail, you absolutely can file with the court.
Great. I have another question here as to who can serve as a truancy prevention facilitator.
Okay, great. Another great question. It can be an existing employee or it can be a newly hired person, but most likely it's going to be a district office level administrator or someone working under them whose job it is to oversee the truancy prevention measures for the district. They're going to be the ones that are in the know, and basically they're the ones that are going to be overseeing this whole process. Okay.
Great.
Great.
And let me drop in again.
Sure.
Because I'm a former educator. everybody is an attendance enhancer.
Mm-hmm.
A good attendance starts with great teachers that love kids primarily and love the art of teaching. Again, I just ask my educators out there, why do people like to go to Miss So-and-so's class in British literature, something I thought that was just extremely boring? But they like going to her class. Maybe because she dressed like the characters. Maybe she talked like the characters. Maybe she just cared. When James White was a 7th grade football coach, Reginald was 70% of my football team's offense. One of the first things I did when I walked in the morning is I went to check to make sure Reginald was in class, because I didn't want to lose my job as a coach, okay? And I needed Reginald out there, but he needed to be in class. If he was not in class, I was on the phone calling. So the first line in truancy prevention is the classroom teacher. Everybody is doing truancy prevention.
Absolutely. I think we always always go back to that. It takes a village, and everybody has a ability to influence children in school-going behavior. Another question that I have is, let me start with this one. It's a little long, and I appreciate everybody writing in their questions, so thank you for that, and continue to ask them if you have any. Any effort to assist school personnel with getting students to attend school is much appreciated, so thank you all. Thanks for that comment. The challenge in the bill is the requirement to issue a warning notice to inform the parent that the student is subject to truancy prevention measures after the 3rd unexcused absence, when you have a campus of 2,000 students who are on period attendance versus daily attendance schedule. This can quickly amount to hundreds of warning notices weekly. Any suggestions for managing this requirement? Anybody want to field that?
I think if you get into the bill, that takes care of itself. You know, and the bill, the legislation really, you know, it addresses kids missing partial days or a period, okay? But again, let's look at this practically, okay? If there are 8 class periods during the day, okay? If there are 8 class periods during the day, and I get to class on time for periods 1, 2, and 3, I miss 4, and then miss periods 5, 6, 7, and 8. What's the issue there? Is that an inside the school issue, or is that a truancy issue?
It sounds like it's both.
Yeah, can I chime in right there, Representative White, because I think that's something that I wanted to mention earlier. There's so many ways I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head that everyone should be an advocate for keeping the kids in the seats. And so many times, and this is not blame on administrators or educators, certainly teachers want to see their kids. I mean, they love the kids in the classroom.
Yes. But
sometimes the policies that are set up for the schools make it way too easy for kids to skip. I'll give you an example. I grew up directly across the street from a high school, and right now, because so many kids, you know, in this low-income neighborhood, somehow, you know, they still find a way to buy a car, but they don't have a driver's license. But these kids, because they don't have a driver's license, they can't park inside the school parking lot. And it just makes it all too easy for those kids to leave the campus and be right in their cars and gone, and they never show back up after class. My brother happens to be also a coach and a school teacher there at the local high school. You know, I'm very proud of him that he went back to teach at the high school where most of my family graduated from. And I'll tell you, that's the frustrating thing, that, you know, you see something simple and practical. You mentioned the word practical earlier, Representative White. But some of these practical solutions to making skipping harder on our kids just aren't being implemented. And I think that's the difficult part, is to, you know, looking at these kids. And I mean, if mom's not watching me not doing my homework, I'm probably not going to do it as much. But my mom was on me. She made sure I did it. And I think that's something that where I mean, at least the bill says, you know, we as a legislature, you know, we know we've made some mistakes by criminalizing these kids.
Yes.
For those
Yes.
folks, all those folks out there that believe that you just want to blame the parent and it's all the parent's fault. Well, okay, you left the teeth in there for them, Representative White, and that's something that we had to do, and we did. But then it goes further in saying, okay, now what are all the other issues? And you mentioned earlier, and I didn't mention this when I made my opening statement, is you mentioned counseling and some of the kids and the issues that they face. But we also have to look at our administrators and those that set the rules and the policies that could contribute to it being just way too easy for our kids to skip. You know, and one campus monitor for a school of 1,500, I don't want to be that campus monitor. You know, it's just very different, and I know that that's a whole different subject, and I don't want to get on a tangent thinking of time here, but I just wanted to make that point, and thank you, Representative White.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Kim Brewer. I'm gonna jump in here on top of you as well. As a former teacher, I can definitely understand, and while I agree with everything, being that monitor on that campus and the idea of, you know, 2,000 plus students and having all of those notifications to go out, that is a huge burden. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out it. And one of the things that's going to make this bill successful is with that huge burden, those notifications have to go out in a timely manner. They have to go out, and parents have to be notified right after that third absence, or we're not going to make a bit of difference. We're not going to get to the root of the problem in time before they have their 6th, their 7th, their 8th absence. So those timely notifications are necessary, and it is a huge problem. And so to the person that asked that question, I would love to follow up with you and say that that's where attention to attendance, where we pull the information for you, we have it there for you, and then we send out those notifications for you, because that is a huge issue with this bill, is being able to get those notifications out there to reach those students in time.
Great. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Representative Romero and White. In the interest of time, I have one last question, and then the remaining questions we'll go ahead, as I mentioned before, and address after the webinar. But I think this, so I'm going to ask all panelists to keep their remarks brief, since we're down to about the last 5 minutes and would like to summarize before we go. But the question is, how can we promote a culture of student and parent engagement when we have underfunded schools and no pre-existing programs that necessarily keep kids in their seat? How would you address that? And I think you started to earlier about having engaging curriculum, et cetera. Anyone who would like to start there?
I'll jump in. There's no doubt that, at least here in the state of Texas, we're in a school finance lawsuit, okay? But let me tell you something, and everybody needs to understand, we're going to fix the school finance thing, okay? I have 26 rural underfunded school districts, so I have an interest in making sure that this stuff gets fixed. But let me tell you something. When have schools ever been fully funded in the history of America? Okay, you know, when have we not had students coming from tough environments? That's what makes America America. So I would also caution folks, this truancy thing, we got into this in the mid-90s. Before 95, there was no criminal offense on the juvenile for missing school. So we have done this before. Truancy wasn't a criminal offense when I was in school, and they were talking about school finance then. So I just think everybody just needs to, let's just get on board and get our kids in class, and let's support them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative White. Anyone else have anything to add before I move on?
I think that we have to make sure that teachers, the parents, understand that they are the #1 teacher of their children. And you know, here in Fort Worth, you know, our schools get $3,500 for parent engagement. We can't ask for it if we can't help get them into the schools as well.
Very much so. We agree completely. Thank you so much, Representative Romero. I'd like to just take a moment to sort of sum it up and sort of the things that we've talked about. So House Bill 2398 marks a paradigm shift in how we view students with attendance issues. It's a proactive approach to foster engagement with early identification and early intervention, working towards finding the solutions and root causes to barriers for kids coming to school on time every day. And what we're really trying, what HB 2398 is trying to do is set schools and families up for success with all of our common shared goal, which is to keep students in school, engaged, on time, and on track for graduation. I'd like to thank all of our presenters this morning, Mr. Mike Brown, Representative White, Representative Romero, Reverend Tatum, and Ms. Brewer for joining us. And we will have this webinar, today's webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the Attendance Institute's website, as well as the question and answers we will email out and a follow-up handout that we have prepared for any of you that are working in your school agency to take back to share out and initiate the conversation about how do we implement House Bill 2398 to be successful in getting kids to school. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.